The morning sun cast long shadows across the rocky terrain of eastern Afghanistan as Lieutenant Commander Jake Reaper Morrison checked his watch. It was 05:47 hours, and his 6-man SEAL team had been moving through the mountains for 3 days straight. Their mission was supposed to be simple: locate and capture a high-value Taliban commander who had been coordinating attacks on coalition forces. Morrison wiped the sweat from his brow and looked back at his team. Chief Petty Officer Marcus Bull Rodriguez carried the heavy machine gun, his massive frame making the weapon look almost toy-like. Petty Officer First Class Tommy Ghost Chen moved like a shadow between the rocks, his sniper rifle carefully protected in its case. The youngest member, Petty Officer Second Class Danny Kid Walker, carried extra ammunition and medical supplies, his eager eyes constantly scanning the horizon. Behind them, Petty Officer First Class Mike Diesel Thompson managed their communications equipment, while Petty Officer First Class Sam Doc Martinez kept watch on their 6 o'clock position. Each man had trained for years to reach this level of elite military service, and they trusted each other with their lives. The intelligence reports had been clear. Their target, Commander Rashid Khalil, was hiding in a compound somewhere in these mountains. Local informants had provided coordinates, and satellite imagery showed a cluster of buildings that matched the description perfectly. What the reports hadn't mentioned was how many fighters Khalil had with him, or how well armed they might be. Morrison raised his hand, signaling the team to halt. Through his binoculars, he could see the compound nestled in a valley about 2 kilometers ahead. Smoke rose from one of the buildings, indicating people were definitely present. The structure looked exactly like the photos they had studied during their mission briefing back at base. "Ghost, what do you see through that scope?" Morrison whispered into his radio. Chen had already set up his sniper rifle on a stable rock formation. His voice came back calm and professional. "I count at least 8 tangos moving around the compound. 2 guards at the main entrance, looks like they're carrying AK-47s. There's movement in the windows of the main building, but I can't get a clear count from this distance." The compound consisted of 3 main buildings arranged in a rough triangle, with high walls connecting them to form a courtyard in the center. It was a typical Afghan fortress design, built to withstand attacks from multiple directions. The main building appeared to be 3 stories tall, with narrow windows that would make excellent firing positions for defenders. Morrison studied the terrain carefully. The approach to the compound would require crossing about 800 meters of open ground with very little cover. A few scattered boulders and a dry riverbed provided the only concealment available. It wasn't ideal, but they had worked with worse conditions before. "Bull, you and Diesel take the north side. Doc and Kid, you're with me on the south approach. Ghost, find yourself a good overwatch position where you can cover both teams. We move in 15 minutes. The team began their final preparations. Each man checked his weapons, ammunition, and communication equipment one last time. They had done this routine hundreds of times in training and dozens of times in real combat situations. The familiar ritual helped calm their nerves and focus their minds on the mission ahead. Rodriguez loaded a fresh belt of ammunition into his M249 machine gun and tested the action. The weapon was his specialty, and he could lay down suppressing fire that would keep enemy heads down while his teammates maneuvered into position. Thompson adjusted his radio equipment and confirmed they had clear communications with their base camp, located about 20 kilometers away. Martinez organized his medical supplies, making sure he could reach everything quickly if someone got wounded. He had saved the lives of countless soldiers during his career, and his teammates knew they were in good hands if things went bad. Walker double-checked his extra ammunition and grenades, knowing that in a firefight, running out of bullets could mean the difference between life and death. Chen found a rocky outcrop about 400 meters from the compound that would give him clear fields of fire in multiple directions. His .300 Winchester Magnum rifle was accurate out to 1,000 meters, and he had made shots at that distance before under combat conditions. From his position, he would be able to provide precision fire support and watch for threats that the assault teams might miss. As they prepared to move out, Morrison received an update from their intelligence officer back at base. The radio crackled with static as the message came through. "Reaper 6, this is base. Be advised, we're picking up increased radio chatter in your area. Looks like there might be more activity than we originally estimated." Morrison acknowledged the transmission and shared the information with his team. It wasn't unusual for intelligence estimates to be incomplete, and they had trained to adapt to changing situations. The possibility of additional enemy fighters just meant they needed to be extra careful and ready for anything. The morning air was crisp and thin at this altitude, making every breath require a bit more effort. The rocky terrain was treacherous with loose stones that could easily cause a twisted ankle or worse. Each step had to be carefully placed to avoid making noise that might alert the guards at the compound. As they began their approach, Morrison felt the familiar mixture of excitement and caution that came with every mission. His team was among the best-trained special operations forces in the world, but combat was always unpredictable. No matter how much planning and preparation went into an operation, things could change in an instant. The compound grew larger in their view as they moved closer. Morrison could now see details that hadn't been visible from their earlier position. The walls were higher than they had appeared in the satellite photos, probably about 12 feet tall with broken glass embedded in the top. Guard towers stood at two corners, though they appeared to be empty at the moment. Chen's voice came through their earpieces, calm and steady as always. Reaper 6, I'm in position. I have eyes on the compound and clear fields of fire. 2 guards still at the main entrance, and I'm seeing more movement inside the courtyard now. Looks like they might be getting ready for something. Morrison felt a slight chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. Something about this situation was starting to feel different from their usual operations. The compound seemed too quiet, too organized. But they had come too far to turn back now, and their mission was critical to ongoing operations in the region. The hunt for Commander Khalil was about to begin in earnest. Morrison's team moved like ghosts across the rocky terrain, using every piece of natural cover available. The dry riverbed provided a shallow depression that allowed them to advance while staying below the sight lines of the guards at the compound. Each man moved in carefully timed bounds, with one person covering while the others advanced. The closer they got to the target, the more Morrison's instincts began to warn him that something wasn't right. The compound looked exactly like their intelligence photos, but there was an artificial quality to the scene that bothered him. The guards seemed to be standing in perfect positions, almost like they were posing for surveillance cameras. "Ghost, are you seeing anything unusual about the guard positions?" Morrison whispered into his radio. Chen had been thinking the same thing. Through his high-powered scope, he could see details that weren't visible to the assault teams. Reaper 6, the guards looked too relaxed for a high-security location. They're not scanning their surroundings properly, and their weapons are slung casually. Either they're very poorly trained or something else is going on. Rodriguez and Thompson had reached their position on the north side of the compound. The machine gunner set up his weapon behind a large boulder that would give him good fields of fire while protecting him from return shots. Thompson established communication with their base and confirmed that backup forces were standing by if needed. On the south side, Morrison crouched behind a rocky outcrop with Martinez and Walker. They were now only about 200 meters from the compound walls. At this distance, they could hear voices from inside the courtyard, speaking in the local Pashto language. Martinez, who spoke some of the local dialects, listened carefully to try to understand what was being said. "Doc, what are they talking about?" Morrison asked quietly. Martinez frowned as he strained to hear the conversation. "It's hard to make out clearly, but they seem to be discussing timing for something. I heard the word for soon several times and something about brothers coming from the east." The mention of reinforcements arriving made Morrison's blood run cold. If additional enemy fighters were heading toward the compound, his small team could quickly find themselves outnumbered and surrounded. He had to make a decision quickly about whether to proceed with the assault or withdraw and call for backup. Before he could decide, Walker's sharp eyes spotted movement on the ridge above the compound. "Contact 2 o'clock high. I count at least 6 fighters with weapons moving along the ridgeline." Chen immediately swung his rifle toward the new threat. Through his scope, he could see armed men carrying AK-47s and what looked like rocket-propelled grenade launchers. They were moving in a coordinated fashion that suggested military training rather than the typical irregular tactics of local militia groups. "Reaper 6, we've got a problem," Chen reported. "Those aren't farmers with hunting rifles. These guys look like they know what they're doing and they're armed for serious combat." Morrison realized that their intelligence had been completely wrong about the security situation at the compound. Instead of finding a lightly defended hideout, they had stumbled into what appeared to be a major enemy stronghold. Worse yet, additional fighters were arriving to reinforce the position. As if responding to some unseen signal, the guards at the compound entrance suddenly became much more alert. They unslung their weapons and began scanning the surrounding area with purpose. One of them spoke into a handheld radio, probably coordinating with the fighters on the ridge. "All teams, we've been compromised," Morrison announced over the radio. "Prepare for immediate contact. This is not going according to plan." The situation deteriorated rapidly. More armed figures appeared in the windows of the main building, and Morrison could see the barrels of rifles being positioned to cover all the approaches to the compound. Someone inside had obviously spotted his team despite their careful approach. Suddenly, the morning air erupted with the sharp crack of rifle fire. Bullets began striking the rocks around Morrison's position, sending chips of stone flying in all directions. The enemy had opened fire simultaneously from multiple positions, suggesting a coordinated defense plan. "Take cover. Return fire," Morrison shouted as he dove behind a larger boulder. Rodriguez opened up with his machine gun, the heavy weapon chattering as it sent streams of bullets toward the compound walls. The sound echoed off the surrounding mountains like thunder, and brass casings flew from the weapon as he laid down, suppressing fire. Chen began engaging targets of opportunity with precision shots from his sniper rifle. His first shot took down one of the guards at the main entrance, but immediately drew return fire from shooters in the building windows. Bullets whined off the rocks around his position as enemy fighters tried to locate his hiding spot. Thompson worked frantically with his radio, calling their base for immediate backup support. "Base, this is Reaper Team. We are in contact with a numerically superior enemy force. Request immediate air support and quick reaction force deployment to our position." The response from base was not what they wanted to hear. "Reaper Team, be advised that air support is unavailable due to weather conditions in your area. Quick reaction force is being prepared, but will require at least 2 hours to reach your position." 2 hours might as well have been 2 days given their current situation. Morrison's team was heavily outnumbered, running low on ammunition, and completely surrounded by enemy fighters who seemed to know exactly where they were positioned. Martinez dragged Walker behind better cover as bullets continued to strike around them. The young SEAL had taken a graze across his arm but was still able to fight. "Just a scratch, Doc," Walker insisted, though Martinez could see the wound was more serious than the kid was admitting. More enemy fighters appeared on the ridges surrounding their position. Morrison counted at least 20 armed men, and more seemed to be arriving every few minutes. Someone had definitely been expecting their attack, which meant either their intelligence was completely wrong, or there had been a security leak somewhere in the planning process. "Reaper 6, we need to get out of here," Rodriguez called over the radio between bursts from his machine gun. "We're taking fire from 3 different directions and I'm down to my last 2 belts of ammunition." Morrison assessed their tactical situation quickly. They were trapped in a valley with high ground controlled by the enemy. Their ammunition was running low, they had wounded team members and no immediate backup available. Staying in their current position would eventually result in being overrun, but retreating across open ground while under heavy fire would be extremely dangerous. The enemy had excellent fields of fire from their elevated positions, and Morrison's team would be exposed during any movement. They needed something to break the enemy's advantage and give them a chance to fight their way out. Chen's voice crackled over the radio with urgent intensity. "All teams, I'm seeing vehicle dust clouds approaching from the east. Looks like a convoy of trucks heading this way. We're about to have a lot more company." The trap was closing around them, and Morrison realized that their simple capture mission had turned into a fight for survival. His team was about to face odds that would challenge even their elite training and combat experience. The sound of diesel engines grew louder as the convoy of trucks approached the compound. Morrison watched through his binoculars as 3 pickup trucks loaded with armed fighters came bouncing across the rough terrain. Each vehicle carried at least 6 men with various weapons, including machine guns mounted in the truck beds. "Ghost, can you take out the lead vehicle?" Morrison called to his sniper. Chen lined up his shot carefully, accounting for the movement of the truck and the distance to target. His rifle barked once, and the driver of the lead truck slumped forward. The vehicle swerved violently before crashing into a large boulder, sending fighters tumbling from the back. The other 2 trucks immediately stopped and began unloading their passengers, who quickly spread out to flank Morrison's team from yet another direction. The tactical situation was becoming impossible. Enemy fighters now controlled the high ground on 3 sides, with more approaching from the 4th direction. Walker winced as he changed magazines in his rifle, the wound on his arm making the simple task more difficult. Blood had soaked through the field dressing that Martinez had applied, but the young SEAL refused to stop fighting. "I'm good to go, Reaper 6, he insisted, though his face was pale from blood loss. Rodriguez's machine gun fell silent as he ran through his ammunition supply. "That's it for the belt fed," he announced, switching to his backup rifle. The loss of their heaviest firepower was a serious blow to their defensive capabilities. Enemy fire intensified from all directions as the fighters realized the Americans were running low on ammunition. Bullets ricocheted off rocks constantly, creating a deadly storm of lead and stone fragments that made any movement extremely dangerous. Morrison realized they had perhaps 10 minutes before being completely overrun. His team was down to rifle ammunition and a few grenades, facing at least 30 enemy fighters with more arriving. The mathematics of combat were working strongly against them. "Thompson, any word from base on that support?" Morrison shouted over the gunfire. The communications specialist shook his head grimly. "Weather's getting worse and they still can't get birds in the air. QRF is loading up, but they won't reach us in time." Chen continued to engage targets with surgical precision, making every shot count. His elevated position gave him good fields of fire, but also made him a priority target for enemy shooters. Bullets constantly struck the rocks around him, and he knew it was only a matter of time before one found its mark. Suddenly, a new sound cut through the chaos of battle. From somewhere high above them came the distinctive crack of a different rifle, followed immediately by enemy fighters on the eastern ridge falling to precision shots. The shots were coming from an unexpected direction, and they were extremely accurate. "Who the hell is that?" Rodriguez wondered aloud as another enemy fighter dropped from a shot that clearly hadn't come from Chen's position. Morrison scanned the mountainous terrain above them, trying to locate the source of the friendly fire. Through his binoculars, he caught a brief muzzle flash from a rocky outcrop about 800 meters away on a peak that dominated the entire valley. The mystery shooter was systematically engaging enemy positions with devastating effect. Each shot seemed to find its target, and the enemy fighters were beginning to show signs of confusion as their comrades fell to an unseen marksman. Chen was equally puzzled but grateful for the assistance. "Whoever that is, they're one hell of a shot. Those are some serious long-range hits in difficult conditions." The enemy fighters began to react to the new threat by shifting some of their attention away from Morrison's team. Several groups of fighters started moving toward the high peak where the shots were originating, trying to locate and eliminate the hidden sniper. This redistribution of enemy forces gave Morrison's team some breathing room, but their ammunition situation remained critical. Martinez was down to his last magazine, and Walker was struggling to maintain his rate of fire due to his wound. "We need to use this opportunity to move," Morrison decided. "The mystery shooter has got them confused, but it won't last long. We need to reach better cover while we can." The nearest defensible position was a cluster of large boulders about 150 meters to their west. It would provide better protection and multiple escape routes if they needed to withdraw further. But reaching it would require crossing open ground while under fire. Morrison made the call. "Bound by teams. Bull and Diesel move first. Doc and Kid provide cover. Ghost, keep shooting anything that moves. We're displacing to those rocks on the western slope." Rodriguez and Thompson broke cover and began running toward the boulder cluster in a zigzag pattern designed to make them harder to hit. Enemy fighters immediately opened fire on the moving figures, but the mystery sniper responded by targeting anyone who exposed themselves to shoot at the Americans. The unknown marksman's intervention was proving decisive. Every time an enemy fighter tried to aim carefully at Morrison's team, a precision shot would force them back into cover or eliminate them entirely. The psychological effect on the enemy was enormous, as they couldn't locate the source of the deadly accurate fire. Martinez and Walker prepared for their movement as Rodriguez and Thompson reached the relative safety of the boulder cluster. "Ready, Kid?" Martinez asked, noting that Walker's wound was still bleeding despite the field dressing. "Ready as I'll ever be." "Doc," Walker replied, though his voice showed the strain of blood loss and fatigue. The two SEALs broke cover and began their dash toward the new position. Immediately, several enemy fighters tried to target them, But again, the mystery sniper intervened with perfectly placed shots that either eliminated the threats or forced them to take cover. Chen began his own movement, carrying his heavy sniper rifle while maintaining awareness of enemy positions. His relocation was the most dangerous, as he had to move the greatest distance while carrying the most equipment. Morrison provided covering fire with his rifle, carefully rationing his remaining ammunition. Each shot had to count, as he was down to less than 2 full magazines. The mystery sniper continued to provide overwatch, allowing Chen to reach the new position safely. Finally, Morrison made his own dash to join his team at the boulder cluster. As he ran, he could hear the crack of the unknown sniper's rifle continuing to engage enemy targets. Whoever was up there was buying them precious time and probably saving their lives. Once the team was reunited behind the new cover, they took stock of their situation. Their ammunition was critically low, Walker needed medical attention, and they were still surrounded by superior enemy forces. But the intervention of the mystery marksman had changed the tactical balance significantly. "Reaper 6, Chen called over the radio. "I'm trying to get eyes on our guardian angel up there. That shooting is too good to be accidental. Someone with serious training is helping us out." Morrison nodded as he reloaded one of his last magazines. The identity of their unexpected ally was a mystery, but their intervention had kept his team alive when the situation seemed hopeless. The question now was whether this unknown factor would be enough to tip the scales in their favor for a successful extraction. The mysterious sniper's fire had created a temporary lull in the enemy assault, but Morrison knew it wouldn't last long. Enemy fighters were already adapting to the new threat, using smoke grenades and coordinated movements to avoid exposure to the hidden marksman. His team needed to capitalize on this opportunity before their luck ran out. Thompson finally managed to establish better communication with their base camp. "Reaper 6, I've got clearer comms now. Base says the weather is starting to break and they might be able to get a helicopter in here within the hour." An hour was still a long time when surrounded by hostile forces, but it gave them something to work toward. Morrison studied the terrain around their position, looking for ways to improve their defensive situation while they waited for extraction. The boulder cluster provided good cover from direct fire, but it wouldn't protect them from grenades or rocket-propelled weapons. Morrison could see enemy fighters positioning themselves to use indirect fire against the American position, which would force his team to move again soon. Walker's condition was deteriorating despite Martinez's best efforts with field medicine. The young SEAL had lost more blood than initially apparent, and his responses were becoming slower. He needed proper medical treatment soon, or the wound that had seemed minor could become life-threatening. "Doc, how's the kid holding up?" Morrison asked quietly. Martinez checked Walker's pulse and examined the field dressing again. "He's tougher than he looks, but that wound is worse than it appeared initially. The bullet grazed an artery, and I can't stop the bleeding completely with what I have here. He needs a real medical facility." Chen had been studying the high peak where their mysterious ally was positioned. Through his scope, he occasionally caught glimpses of muzzle flashes, but couldn't make out any details about the shooter. Whoever's up there knows what they're doing. Those shots are coming from at least 800 meters in difficult wind conditions. The enemy fighters were regrouping for another assault, and Morrison could see them moving into new positions that would allow concentrated fire on the boulder cluster. Some were carrying RPGs that could eliminate their cover entirely with a few well-placed shots. Suddenly, Thompson's radio crackled with an unexpected transmission on a frequency they weren't monitoring. The voice was American, with a slight southern accent. "SEAL team in the valley, this is Overwatch. I've been tracking your situation. You've got about 15 minutes before they get those RPGs in position to take out your cover." Morrison grabbed the radio handset. "Overwatch, this is Reaper 6. Who is this? How do you know our frequency?" The response came back immediately. "That's not important right now, Reaper 6. What matters is getting you and your team out of there alive. I've been watching these guys set up an ambush for the past 2 days. This whole thing was a trap from the beginning." The confirmation that their mission had been compromised from the start explained the sophisticated enemy response. Someone had fed false intelligence to lure Morrison's team into a predetermined kill zone. The question was whether their mysterious ally had enough firepower to help them fight their way out. "Overwatch, what's your recommendation? We're low on ammunition and have a wounded man who needs medical attention." The radio was quiet for a moment before the voice responded. There's a landing zone about 600 meters north of your position, where a helicopter could set down safely. Problem is, you'll have to cross open ground while under fire to reach it. I can provide covering fire, but it's going to be risky. Morrison studied the terrain between their current position and the proposed landing zone. It would require crossing a shallow valley with minimal cover, while enemy fighters held elevated positions on both sides. Even with supporting fire from their hidden ally, it would be an extremely dangerous movement. Rodriguez had been listening to the radio conversation while keeping watch on enemy positions. Reaper 6, those RPG teams are getting into position. If we stay here much longer, we're going to get blown out of these rocks. Chen confirmed the assessment through his scope. I count 3 RPG teams moving into firing positions. They'll have us bracketed in about 10 minutes. Morrison made the decision that every special operations leader dreaded, choosing between bad options with no guarantee of success. All right, we're moving to the LZ. Overwatch will need continuous covering fire during the movement. Can you handle that? Roger, Reaper 6. I've got enough ammunition for sustained fire, and I've been marking enemy positions for the past hour. Start your movement when you're ready, and I'll keep their heads down. The team prepared for what would likely be the most dangerous movement of their military careers. Martinez gave Walker additional medical attention, using their last morphine to help manage his pain during the upcoming ordeal. Rodriguez distributed their remaining ammunition evenly among team members. Thompson coordinated with their base to have the extraction helicopter standing by at the earliest possible moment. The pilot would have to brave deteriorating weather conditions and potential enemy fire to reach them, but it was their only chance of getting Walker the medical attention he needed. Chen packed his sniper rifle efficiently, knowing he would need to move quickly while carrying the heavy weapon and its ammunition. His precision shooting had been crucial to their survival so far, and he might need to use it again during their movement to the landing zone. Morrison took one last look at the route they would have to traverse. 600 meters of broken ground with scattered rocks for cover, while enemy fighters with automatic weapons watched from elevated positions. The mathematics of survival were not encouraging. Overwatch were beginning movement in 30 seconds, Morrison announced over the radio. The response came back confident and steady. Roger, Reaper 6, I have eyes on multiple enemy positions. Begin your movement and stay low. I'll start engaging targets as soon as they expose themselves. Rodriguez and Thompson prepared to move first, carrying the heaviest equipment and providing suppressing fire for the rest of the team. Martinez helped Walker prepare for the movement, knowing the wounded SEAL would need assistance to make the journey. As Morrison checked his watch and prepared to give the signal to move, the crack of the mystery sniper's rifle echoed across the valley. An enemy fighter with an RPG fell backward from his position, the weapon clattering down the rocky slope. Their guardian angel was already at work. Move, Morrison commanded, and his team began what might be their final dash toward safety. The hidden sniper's rifle spoke again and again, each shot precisely placed to eliminate threats or force enemy fighters into cover. The intervention was proving even more effective than Morrison had hoped, but he knew their unknown ally couldn't protect them from every angle simultaneously. Rodriguez and Thompson broke cover from the boulder cluster, running in a low crouch toward the first piece of cover on their route to the landing zone. Immediately, enemy fighters opened fire from multiple positions, but the mystery sniper's rifle cracked repeatedly, forcing the shooters to duck for cover or fall to precisely placed shots. The two SEALs reached a small depression in the ground, about 100 meters from their starting position. Rodriguez set up his rifle to provide covering fire while Thompson worked with his radio to guide the incoming helicopter to their location. Next bound, Morrison called over the radio. Martinez helped Walker to his feet, and the two began their movement across the open ground. Walker stumbled twice, his blood loss making coordination difficult, but Martinez kept him moving toward safety. Enemy bullets kicked up dirt around the moving figures. But again, the mysterious marksman intervened with devastating accuracy. Morrison watched through his binoculars as enemy fighters fell or dove for cover whenever they tried to target his men. Chen began his movement next, carrying his heavy sniper rifle while maintaining awareness of threats from multiple directions. His route took him past a cluster of rocks where an enemy fighter had been hiding, but a shot from their hidden ally had eliminated the threat seconds before Chen reached the position. Finally, Morrison made his own dash across the open ground. As he ran, he could hear the steady crack of the mystery sniper's rifle providing overwatch. Each shot seemed perfectly timed to eliminate threats, just as they became dangerous to the moving Americans. The team regrouped at a larger rock formation about halfway to the landing zone. Walker was barely conscious now, supported entirely by Martinez, who was struggling with the weight of the wounded SEAL, plus his own equipment. Thompson received word over the radio that their extraction helicopter was 5 minutes out, but the pilot was reporting enemy ground fire in the area. Reaper 6, the bird is inbound, but they're taking fire from multiple positions. The pilot says he'll try to get in, but it's going to be hot. Morrison could see the landing zone clearly now, a relatively flat area surrounded by rocky outcrops that would provide some protection for a helicopter during landing. But enemy fighters were already moving to positions where they could engage the aircraft with small arms and RPGs. Overwatch. We're going to need that LZ cleared of threats before our ride arrives, Morrison called over the radio. The response came back immediately. Roger, Reaper 6. I can see several enemy teams moving toward the landing zone. I'll start engaging them now, but you need to get there quickly. I can't cover every angle simultaneously. The mystery sniper's fire shifted to targets around the landing zone, and Morrison could see enemy fighters falling or scrambling for cover as precision shots found their marks. Whoever was providing Overwatch had an excellent understanding of battlefield tactics and knew exactly which threats to prioritize. Rodriguez and Thompson moved out again, bounding toward the landing zone while the hidden marksman provided covering fire. They reached the edge of the designated area just as the sound of helicopter rotors became audible in the distance. The UH-60 Blackhawk appeared over the ridge, flying fast and low to minimize exposure to ground fire. Morrison could see bullet holes in the aircraft's fuselage, evidence that the pilot had already braved enemy fire to reach them. Martinez and Walker began their final movement toward the landing zone, with Walker barely able to walk even with assistance. Enemy fighters tried to target the wounded Americans, but the mystery sniper continued to eliminate threats with supernatural accuracy. Chen reached the landing zone and immediately set up his rifle to provide additional covering fire for the helicopter's approach. His position gave him good fields of fire toward enemy positions on the eastern ridge. Morrison made his final dash to join his team at the landing zone. As he ran, an enemy fighter with an RPG emerged from behind a boulder, taking aim at the approaching helicopter. Before Morrison could react, the crack of the mystery sniper's rifle echoed across the valley, and the RPG gunner fell backward. The helicopter flared for landing, its rotors creating a swirling cloud of dust and debris. The crew chief was already at the door, ready to help load the wounded Walker aboard the aircraft. "Load up, load up!" Morrison shouted over the noise of the rotors and continuing gunfire. Rodriguez and Thompson reached the helicopter first, providing security, while Martinez and Chen carried Walker toward the aircraft. The wounded SEAL was unconscious now, having lost too much blood during their movement across the valley. Enemy fire continued from multiple directions, but it was noticeably less accurate and coordinated than before. The mystery sniper had eliminated many of the key leaders and weapon teams, disrupting the enemy's ability to concentrate their fire effectively. Chen was the last to board, carrying his sniper rifle and scanning for threats until the moment he stepped onto the helicopter. As the aircraft lifted off, he could see muzzle flashes from the high peak where their guardian angel continued to provide covering fire. Overwatch. "This is Reaper 6, Morrison called over the radio as the helicopter gained altitude. "We're clear and ascending. Thanks for the assist. Who are you?" The radio crackled with static for a moment before the familiar southern voice responded. "Just someone who believes in helping fellow Americans when they're in trouble, Reaper 6. Glad I could help. How do we contact you?" "We owe you our lives." There was a long pause before the response came back. "That's not necessary, Reaper 6, just doing my job. Stay safe out there." The radio went silent, and subsequent attempts to contact their mysterious ally received no response. Morrison stared out the helicopter window at the high peak where their savior had been positioned, but could see no movement or other signs of human presence. Thompson worked with his communications equipment, trying different frequencies to reach their unknown benefactor. "Nothing, Reaper 6, whoever that was. They're not responding to any calls." The helicopter pilot reported that they were clear of the immediate threat area and heading toward a forward operating base where Walker could receive proper medical treatment. The crew chief had already started an IV and was monitoring the wounded SEAL's vital signs. Rodriguez checked his equipment and discovered that he had only 3 rounds of rifle ammunition remaining. "That was way too close," he muttered. "Without our mystery friend, we'd all be dead back there." Chen was studying the terrain below through his scope, trying to spot any sign of their benefactor. "I've been thinking about those shots. The accuracy, the timing, the tactical awareness. That wasn't some random person who happened to be in the area. That was a professional. Martinez was working to stabilize Walker's condition during the flight. Whoever it was, they saved the kid's life. Another 10 minutes and he would have bled out completely." Morrison continued to puzzle over the identity of their rescuer as the helicopter carried them toward safety. The voice had been American, but that didn't narrow things down much. The shooting skills suggested military training, possibly special operations background. More intriguingly, the mysterious marksman had known their radio frequencies and had been tracking the enemy preparations for days. That level of intelligence gathering suggested someone with significant resources and experience in the region. As the forward operating base came into view, Morrison realized that their mission had raised more questions than it had answered. Not only had they failed to capture their target, but they had discovered a sophisticated enemy network that had been expecting their arrival. The helicopter touched down at the medical facility, and Walker was immediately rushed into surgery. The base medical officer confirmed that Martinez's field treatment had been excellent, but the young SEAL would need several weeks of recovery before returning to duty. Morrison's team was debriefed by intelligence officers who were very interested in the details of their mysterious ally. The fact that an unknown American operative was apparently working independently in the region raised significant security concerns at the highest levels of command. "We need to find out who that was," the intelligence colonel insisted. "Someone with that level of skill and access to classified frequencies could be either a tremendous asset or a serious security risk." Chen provided detailed information about the shooting skills he had observed, emphasizing the extreme accuracy and tactical awareness their benefactor had demonstrated. "Sir, whoever that was could have eliminated our entire team from that position if they had wanted to. Instead, they chose to save our lives." Rodriguez agreed with Chen's assessment. "That person had us completely at their mercy and chose to help instead of harm. In my book, that makes them a friend until proven otherwise." The debriefing lasted several hours, with intelligence officers trying to piece together any clues about their rescuer's identity. Radio intercepts from the area were analyzed, satellite imagery was reviewed, and databases were searched for any Americans reported missing or operating independently in the region. Thompson worked with communications specialists to analyze the radio equipment their mystery ally had used. The signal characteristics suggested military-grade equipment, but that still didn't narrow down the possibilities significantly. Meanwhile, medical personnel confirmed that Walker would make a full recovery. 3 weeks later, Morrison received an unexpected summons to report to the base commander's office. He found Colonel Sarah Mitchell waiting for him with a thick file folder and a serious expression on her face. "Lieutenant Commander Morrison, we've made some progress on identifying your mystery sniper," she began, opening the folder to reveal photographs and documents. "What I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest levels." Morrison studied the photographs, which showed a weather-beaten man in his 50s, with steel-gray hair and piercing blue eyes. The face looked familiar somehow, though he couldn't place where he might have seen it before. Staff Sergeant Michael Phantom O'Brien, formerly of the Army's 75th Ranger Regiment and later attached to Special Operations units, whose missions remain classified. He was reported killed in action 2 years ago during a classified operation in this same region. The revelation hit Morrison like a physical blow. "He's supposed to be dead?" Colonel Mitchell nodded gravely. "According to official records, yes. But we've now discovered that O'Brien survived that mission and has been operating independently in these mountains ever since. Apparently, he's been conducting his own private war against the same terrorist networks that have been targeting our forces." Morrison studied the file more carefully, reading through O'Brien's impressive military record. Multiple tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, expert marksman qualification with numerous weapon systems, and citations for valor that painted a picture of an exceptional warrior. "Why didn't he return to base after surviving that mission?" Morrison asked. "That's where the story gets complicated," Colonel Mitchell replied. The mission he was on involved a betrayal by someone in our intelligence network. His entire team was ambushed and killed because someone fed information to the enemy. O'Brien survived, but he had no way of knowing who he could trust within our own organization. The pieces began falling into place for Morrison. O'Brien's knowledge of their radio frequencies, his awareness of enemy preparations, and his ability to track terrorist movements all made sense if he had been operating in the region for 2 years. "How did you finally identify him?" Morrison inquired. Colonel Mitchell smiled slightly. "Your communications specialist, Thompson, did excellent work analyzing the radio signatures from your contact. We were able to match the equipment characteristics to gear that O'Brien's unit had been carrying when they disappeared." Morrison realized that O'Brien had been watching their mission from the beginning, probably evaluating whether they could be trusted before deciding to intervene. The fact that he had chosen to save their lives suggested he had concluded they were legitimate American forces rather than part of whatever conspiracy had killed his team. "Where is he now?" Morrison asked. "Unknown. We've tried to make contact through various channels, but he's not responding. O'Brien apparently trusts no one in the official chain of command, and honestly, given what happened to his team, I can understand his caution." Colonel Mitchell pulled out another photograph, this one showing the compound where Morrison's team had been ambushed. "This is interesting, though. Satellite imagery taken the day after your extraction shows that the compound was completely destroyed. Someone used explosives to eliminate the entire enemy position." Morrison studied the image, which showed nothing but rubble where the buildings had once stood. The destruction was thorough and professional, suggesting someone with demolitions, expertise, and access to significant quantities of explosives. "O'Brien's handiwork?" Morrison guessed. "Almost certainly. He apparently used your mission as an opportunity to identify and eliminate a major enemy stronghold. The intelligence we've gathered suggests that Compound was a key coordination center for terrorist activities throughout the region. The revelation that their failed mission had actually resulted in a significant victory against the enemy was both satisfying and sobering. O'Brien had turned their near disaster into a strategic success, but at the cost of remaining isolated from his own forces. Morrison thought about Walker, who was recovering well from his wounds and would soon return to duty. The young SEAL owed his life to a man who was officially dead and couldn't be publicly recognized for his heroism. "What happens now?" Morrison asked. Colonel Mitchell closed the file carefully. "Officially, this conversation never happened. O'Brien remains classified as killed in action, and your mystery sniper remains unidentified, but unofficially we're hoping that someone might be able to establish contact with him." Morrison understood the unspoken suggestion. "You want me to go back out there and try to find him?" "I want you to think about it. O'Brien is a valuable asset who's been operating without support for 2 years. He's proven he's still on our side, but he's also proven he can't be brought in through normal channels. Maybe someone whose life he saved might have better luck making contact." Morrison considered the proposal carefully. Searching for a man who didn't want to be found in thousands of square miles of hostile territory would be extremely dangerous. But O'Brien had risked his own life to save Morrison's team, and the gesture deserved some kind of response. "If I were to attempt contact, what would be the message?" Morrison asked. "That his country hasn't forgotten him. That we know what really happened to his team, and we've identified and dealt with the security leak that caused it. Most importantly, that he has friends who would welcome him home." Colonel Mitchell stood and walked to the window, looking out at the mountains where O'Brien was presumably still hiding. "He's been alone out there for 2 years, fighting our enemies with no support and no recognition. That takes a special kind of courage and dedication." Morrison made his decision. "I'll need a small team and we'll have to go in completely off the books. No official mission orders, no backup support, no record of the operation." "Understood. And Morrison? If you do make contact with him, tell him that there are people in this organization who consider him a hero, regardless of what the official records say." 3 days later, Morrison found himself back in the mountains with Chen and Rodriguez, carrying minimal equipment and enough supplies for a week-long search. They had no specific destination, only the general area where O'Brien was believed to be operating. On their second day in the field, They found a message carved into a tree trunk near a mountain stream. The carving was fresh, and it contained coordinates that weren't on any official map. Morrison recognized the style of military communication and knew they were on the right track. Following the coordinates led them to a small cave hidden among rocky outcrops. Inside, they found evidence that someone had been using the location as a temporary shelter. More importantly, they found a handwritten note addressed to Reaper 6. The note was brief and to the point. If you're reading this, it means you came back looking for answers. Meet me at sunrise tomorrow at the place where we first spoke. Come alone, and bring proof that you can be trusted. Morrison knew immediately what O'Brien meant. The place where they had first spoken was the landing zone where his team had been extracted. As for proof of trust, Morrison had brought something he hoped would be sufficient. Walker's dog tags along with a message of gratitude from the young SEAL who owed his life to the Phantom Sniper.